Well, here we are, our first session. I know some people just ended up coming in also at the same point, so we are going to have a small but a powerful service here tonight. We're very excited about our new service, about our new church, and what is happening here tonight. This is going to be something unique. This is going to be something a little different. And in this way, everything that we're planning on doing here with Lighthouse and Identity in Christ, Lighthouse is contributing to what we're doing here in the church environment. Identity in Christ is a Christian counseling organization that is also going to contribute here. And both of these are coming together to be able to teach people how to embrace the Holy Spirit of God. Because this is something that really is not happening right now in the church today. And with someone I was just talking about before our service they were saying that this world is in a crisis place. And I agree with that this world is in a place of pain. It's in a place of searching. You have people that are searching for answers, and it's not in the Bible. A lot of times people are going outside of it because they've already decided that the Bible doesn't have any power to it, that it doesn't work. And so they go to another method, and we're gonna explore and talk about why that is and all of it. But the point of what we're doing here, and what we're doing here is called the Lighthouse Identity Project, and that's combining these two organizations, coming together and teaching people how to live in the power of God. It is forming community. It is something that is teaching people how to be able to embrace God's presence in a way that it'll bring in the intellectual, bring in the spiritual, and also through fellowship and discipleship with one another. So there are going to be some things that are going to be familiar from church service. We will have some worship, like what we're going to do in just a second. We're going to have one song that we're going to do in worship, and then we're going to get into the first part of tonight's service. There are going to be 3 sections. So the first part is going to focus in on you. And when I say you, it's because it's focusing in on the individual, on myself. We all have a way of operating, and we need to be familiar with that. Why do I think the way that I think? Why do I act the way that I act? And each of us are wired in different ways also. We're going to talk about those kind of things as well. Don't worry, it's not all tonight. This is going to be over a period of time. But the first section will focus in on you, so the individual. The second part is going to be more of us, which is through fellowship, through some discipleship. Tonight it's going to be more of kind of getting to know each other a little bit better, and kind of understanding our background a little bit. And if you're more just not into talking or whatever, that's okay, it's fine. But we want to get to know you. We want to hear your story. We want to understand where you're at, because that's an important part of the process. And then the third section is going to be more of a message from the Bible. And it's going to teach you how to go deeper. And that's what we're calling that, is the going deeper. And don't worry if it's a little much where you're like, wow, he's really going into some stuff. The more that you get familiar with how I teach, the more that you will recognize patterns, the more that you will see that these things are over and over, they're affirming the same things over and over and over again, and they work. And so bear with us, and we're excited about tonight. Like I said, we're going to worship one song, and then we're going to get into the first section for tonight's gathering. It's not a service. We're trying to change the terminology that we use here. So instead of a service or regular church, it is going to be a gathering here. So our gathering, our first song, won't you please stand as we worship here together? So in this first section here, like I said, we want to be able to help. I've had people before that they've come into counseling, and again, even just in some of the discussions today, this is evening, but today, and I need a timer, because as some of you know, I can talk. So to keep me on track here, keep us on schedule. So I've had people that have come and they've talked to me and they've said, some of the damage that I've had from churches is that, and trust me, before I even get into that, I love the church. I am a pastor. I love the church, but I think the church needs some reforming. It needs to remember what it was supposed to be for in the first place. It has forgotten and strayed. It has allowed itself to become more worldly. And in that, we see people that are not loving one another the way that Christ loves us. You can go all the way over to love and then neglect truth, and that's not good either. But there's a place where you can live in truth and in love, and both happen. And so I've had people that come into counseling and they say, I've had people that have good intentions that are Christians, and they say, Derek, all you have to do, they say to me, all I have to do is just pray more, or all I have to do is I just need to go to church more, or I just need to read my Bible more. And I know, I always I cringe whenever I hear that, because I know that they have good intentions. They want to help the person. They know that those things can help. But that's just like telling a person that has alcohol problems to just stop drinking. Or a person that has a drug addiction and say, well, just stop taking drugs. And you want to punch them in the face when you hear that. Because it's not that easy. And what that exposes is that clearly they have no idea what you're struggling with. They have no idea. So the people, the way that God has structured things, we forget this. The way that he structured things is that God meets people that are imperfect, that have problems. We all have problems. Even the person that has their life seemingly all together, I promise you, they have problems. They have struggles. They have challenges. It's those challenges that God meets us in and he helps us with, especially when we realize that I can't do anything to help myself here. I'm stuck here and I can't do anything about it. And you feel enslaved to whatever that is, whether it be fear, anger, or drugs, or sex, or whatever it is. There's many. It's not just those things either, money or whatever, shame, self-worthlessness. We realize that I can't do anything I want to. I don't want to be like this, but I can't do anything. And when a person that has been touched by God, but not gone through what you're going through, has well-intentioned purposes of saying, all you have to do is you just got to find Jesus. Yes, that is true. But we're supposed to walk with people to show them how to walk with Jesus. And the only way that we have that kind of compassion for people and empathy is when we've gone through it ourselves. When I have surrendered myself to Christ and I was willing to follow him wherever he led me, then I started seeing him bring me people that had struggled with the exact same things that I had struggled with. And I remember at one point when I was going through a whole bunch of struggles saying to God, why do I have to go through all this stuff? What did I do to deserve this? And sometimes the answer is, in fact, often is nothing. That's the world that we live in. It is a fallen world. God didn't create it that way. He didn't create it that way, but it is a fallen world. And there's a lot of evil that's here. It's not an all bad world. There is good still here, thankfully. But it's got major issues. There's a lot of evil here. A lot. When God meets us in the places that we're at, and he pulls us out of that, It helps, first of all, when we have somebody, they're called disciples, or discipling, a discipler, a person that disciples somebody else. They walk alongside them. It helps when you have someone like that to walk alongside of you, to show you how to deal with the different things that are going to happen in this journey. We see in the Bible there are times that Jesus just ends up healing a person. That's what everybody expects. Everybody just wants a healing like this, and it's done. It doesn't happen like that often. Sometimes it does. But more often, let me put it this way, when it does, when I've seen it happen like that, do you think that person's life is totally changed immediately and everything's perfect? Cinderella story, all of a sudden they lived happily ever after they were healed, then everything just went great. Their finances were amazing. They were millionaires. They had no marital problems. All of their kids got in line and stuff. Job went perfect, everything, and then they lived forever. It doesn't happen that way. Just because you got healed from whatever it is, whether it be cancer or something like that, there are other issues. You've got marital issues still. You've still got maybe financial issues. You've got other things that are still there. That healing is to show you and give you a foundation, a pillar to stand on and know that God can heal and wants to heal. And He is willing to heal, but He's calling you to respond in a way to follow Him, to surrender to Him. And it's a journey, a one step at a time journey. And that's what discipleship is walking with another person. When they're struggling, when they're having a hard time, that you walk with them. Sometimes it's to remind them of the things that God is doing good or that the progress that they are making. Sometimes it's just to shut up and just sit there and pray with them and listen to them. And don't say a word. Nothing. That's what they need. You to be doing nothing but being there. But too many Christians, they think they got the answer and they got to arrogantly preach down on everybody else. And whoever hears that, they're like, I don't need you. I don't need another person telling me what I need to do. When we walk alongside them, then we show them the love of Jesus. And the most awesome part about it is that God shows up in it when we do it His way. And this is where I'm going to back up. And I want to kind of go into this subject matter. And that is this. Stories are important. Stories are important. Stories are things that we hear our whole life. When we're younger, we have children's stories. We have stories that nowadays they're more of movies that we have that end up happening. And they are extremely important because, number one, they tell us something about, a lot of times, many years ago, they would tell us about our history before movies and stuff like that. You would have stories that told us about our identity, about who we are as a people, who we are as a culture. It tells us about where we came from. It maybe even tells us about purpose. It helps to guide us into truth and to keep us from making mistakes that others have made in the past. It illuminates heroes. And if you really want to understand a culture, look at their stories. Look at the movies that they have. Look at the things that guide them, that encourage them. When you have a people that are being persecuted or that there's a lot of injustice, then there are stories of heroes that have integrity. People that lead us by incredible integrity, that they fight for the poor, that they fight for those that are oppressed, that they stand up against those that are powerful and using their powers to suppress other people and oppress them. Because it gives hope, gives courage. helps us to endure. It hopefully changes the next generation to want to be more like that. But the more that a culture is comfortable, the more comfortable we get, the more that our heroes, heroines, the storylines become more self-centered, more me-centered, more dark. They become more selfish, that it's just up to me, that I'm the hero. It's more the heroes that you get, and trust me, here's the thing. I wrestle with this sometimes. When I was younger, I liked Batman as a superhero. Batman's a really dark character. And you see a lot of Batman-like heroes today. You don't know if they're really good or bad. They're consumed with anger and revenge. And if it is to be, it's up to me kind of a thing. The culture turns darker. It turns more self-centered. It's more about me. And you start to see people go into darker places. We see in our culture, even I think it's fascinating that we have a social media platform that is so big and vast, and yet so many people struggle with depression and darkness and being alone. Just as important as the stories is the narrator. If you have a narrator that understands the story, then they tell you the right things to focus in on. You can have you can have two different narrators, same story, and one of them focuses in on certain elements of that story, the details of a certain story. They highlight the characteristics of certain people in that story. And really, depending on what that narrator is and where their loyalty is, will depend on how that story is told. You can hear the same story being told by two different narrators, and it's a very different story because the details that are highlighted in it are different. The story that we are going to focus in on, and it's not all tonight, it's going to be over the period of time that we're together, which I hope is many years. We are going to focus in on elements of the story that are what God intended for us to understand it. Now, let me back up a second, because some people could say, well, Derek, that's pretty arrogant. So you're saying you're the only one that understands the right way to tell the story? No. The way that the Bible is written, you'll see. That's why I'm going to say, when we go deeper, I'm going to show you things that show you the patterns of what's happening in the Bible. And it shows you and affirms for you what's most important about this story. Why is this character important? And all of these things, it is very poetic, but all of these things will show you what the point and the purpose is. Everything in the Bible, though, also, we'll see there are places that have pitfalls in it. So if we start to become very self-centered, we have a tendency to go down these paths that will lead nowhere good. And we'll talk about those when they come up and why they are. But this whole point of knowing you, knowing me, knowing why I think the way I think is so that I understand why God's word and his story and me at times clash. Why I don't want to come into that story sometimes. Why it offends me. Why it irritates me. Why certain things are triggers for me. And sometimes when the more I know about myself also, the more I can understand why my triggers are different from your triggers. And yours, and yours. All of these. Triggers come from different places. We have our own stories. Our own stories also give us passions, though. And as God breathes his life into us, he gives us passions about helping people that are also have those same triggers, and help to bring them into the love of God if we let Him bring us into it. So here's the deal. We have a story that is very old. It's also very lost. And part of the reason is many years, but also many really bad narrators. Taking down different paths, exposing different things that lead us into places that are no good. And here's the deal. The Bible shows this is the most awesome thing, and it's a verification, validation of this. In the very wisdom literature in Proverbs, it talks about that there are two ways, two paths. That you have the path of wisdom, knowledge, truth. And you have another path, which is a deceptive path. It's not truth. And isn't that deception is not total lie? Deception is a partial truth that's twisted. And so it takes truth, and you know the deal. All of us have had somebody gossip about us before, where they use partial truths, and they get the attention. They're like, well, clearly this person knows what they're talking about. But once then they get that validation, then they can twist some things in there and deceive enough to make it whatever they want to make it. And here's the part of this story, why it's so important is because it's an old story that tells us our purpose. It tells us why we're here. It does tell us our history. And it is a story that when understood in truth, and you learn to walk the path that it guides us in, it meets us where we are, and it validates that you're on the right path with true life. Powerful life. Life that loves others. A life that is a surrendered life, not self-centered. And it's not that arrogant Christian that looks at others and says, you need to be like me. All you have to do is just pray more. All you have to do is just read your Bible more. To talk down or be sometimes some of the meanest people that are out there. When we're on the right track, we aren't going to be perfect like Jesus, but we are going to love like Jesus. And we are going to have God's presence with us. And it will show up regularly. Everything changes in that. So there's a validation to know that I am on the right track. I am getting healing. Whether it be spiritual, whether it be physical, whether it be intellectual, psychological, there is healing. Because here's what the story basically says ultimately. The story tells us that we were created, every one of us, for a purpose. And it's not just a purpose like, I've got a purpose. The purpose is so incredibly awesome. It is so incredibly awesome that an incredibly powerful oppressor or enemy has made all of his effort to keep you from getting there, to learning about your purpose, not only understanding it, but coming into it, and has dedicated everything he can to deceive you, to keep you, and just, because you can get some truth, and you can start on the path, and you're like, hey, this is pretty good. This is good. But he's smart. And he's like, if I can knock them off that path, though, I can keep them from coming into the fullness of what they were always meant to be. And so if I just knock over here, I can get them to veer off a little bit. And if I keep doing that, they'll get so far they don't even know how to get back on. He's dedicated everything to doing that. Everything. And my encouragement to you is don't let anyone take from you what you've been given. You're already given it. And this story teaches you how to come back into it. And here's the thing, don't believe me. Don't say, you don't know me. A lot of you don't know me. So to sit there and say, well, Derek, I'll just trust you unconditionally or, without even getting to know you or anything like that is reckless, in my opinion. Here's the thing, put it to the test. Put it to the test. Because I guarantee you, if you do, the most amazing, everything changes. Everything changes. It doesn't matter what your past has been, what you've gone through, the hurts, pains, goods, blessings, all of it. It's not just pain, it's blessings as well. The context you grew up in is for a purpose. The context you live in now is for a purpose. You were created to speak into a context, a group of people, and you also have hurts and pains that are there that God definitely wants to heal you from, can heal you from, and has shown us that there is a path to come into that. And when we do experience it, then we struggle, and part of the struggle is the blessing that gives us the power to become these incredible warriors for the kingdom of God. Because when other people struggle, I will never say to someone, all you have to do is just this. What I'll say is, I've been there, and I understand it. I also struggled with that. It's hard. Here's what I did. These are some things that can help. Let me pray with you. Let's talk through this stuff. Let's work through these things. And in time, you know the way to overcome it because you walked that path. If a person comes in to rescue you in a place, whether it be a deep forest that you don't know your way out, or some cave that you can't see anything because it's so dark you can't see your way out. They come in, they find you, and they say, hey, we finally found you. Follow me out of here. They came in, they know the way out. They know the path. But if that person is lost in there with you and they don't know how to get out, why would you follow them? They're just as lost as you are. They have no idea how to get out of there. We learn how to be able to come through where it is from where we are, where they are. And the most amazing thing is that we watch God bring us these people. I've had times where I've been talking to somebody, I'm like, God, why are you talking? Why am I even sitting here with this person? And I don't get it. Most of the conversation we're like for coffee or whatever. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. This is going nowhere. And I'm praying inside my head as we're talking and stuff. And just about as it's ready to end, then they share something. I'm like, there it is. There it is. And it's always something that I can help them with. Where I'm like, I've been there. There are a few times that I've had people have come to me and I have to say, I've never dealt with that, so I don't think I'd be the best person to help you with that, but I know somebody who is. And I'd be happy to introduce you to them. It's amazing how many times God brings people and I'm like, I know where they are. I know where they are because I've been there. And we know the way out. So this story, it's important to understand how to walk the path in truth and to understand what the deceptions are that can get us off track. By us understanding ourselves more, we'll understand why I am susceptible to certain deceptions more than others. Why I will go to a place of darkness more when I'm triggered with this particular thing. Why certain things bother me more than my wife. It's interesting also, as I go on this journey, it made our marriage better. There was a time where I looked at my wife and I said, who thinks like you think? Nobody thinks like that. I don't think like that. And then she looked at me and she said the same thing. She said, who thinks like you think? Nobody thinks like that. It was a great fight. Nobody thinks like that. And yet, what we're going to share over these weeks is I started to learn that she thinks differently. She has a different way of thinking, which we'll share. There is something to help us kind of see. They referred to different numbers, which numbers have a different way of processing things. And that helps us to be able to understand. I can understand why my wife Jen thinks a certain way. I don't still process that way, so I don't relate in the sense that I think that way. But when she talks a certain way, thinks a certain way, has certain triggers, I at least can understand where they're coming from. I get it. I don't relate in the sense of that I'm going through the same thing. But what's interesting is that others that share her same number, that's like a party for them. They're like, these are my people. We all think the same way. The rest of this world's crazy. We're all in the same boat. This is the good group here. There are 9 numbers. And my number is different than her number. But when we each understood that, we were able to meet each other where we are and to be a powerful team together. So our marriage got stronger. And when you understand that about each other, then you also can learn how to be able to be that way with other people as well and not so impatient. Because we are self-centered. We were created in the image and likeness of God. Most powerful being that there is in all of creation. There's nothing bigger or better than him. Your purpose is to know him and to reflect him. And yet something majorly bad happened to break that and brought sin into the picture, brokenness. And we all see it in different ways. When you see in the Bible where it says that God said, don't eat from this tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, we are learning right now what good and evil is. We are learning evil. We are learning what that means, what that looks like to live apart from him. The most awesome thing is he is doing a ton. He already did everything to make it possible for us to come back to him and to embrace again his image, his likeness. But it's a journey. It's not just a snap your fingers miracle. And if you get one of those, awesome. But that doesn't mean everything in your life is going to be perfect. You've got other stuff as well that still is going to need to be a journey with God. It's a pillar. It's a foundation. It is an anchor in the storm to keep you from being thrown by the waves and deceived, but to remember that something reached out to you in your place of hurt, and it gave you something, a miracle. And so you are expected to follow that. And if we do, he continues to heal and to strengthen and to guide you into his life. Light, love, power, peace. It's good stuff. I've watched many, hundreds of people come through this process. And that's what we're all about, is helping people to understand the you, but also who God is, and then as a community to encourage and help one another to be able to walk that path, to be able to strengthen in God, even to be able to find other people that share the same number that you share, that process things the same way that you do. I'll give you a little bit of a taste of it. Jen, being a 9, some of the things that she likes is blankets are really important to her. She likes being in blankets. What's another thing that's blankets and naps are... And passive aggressive. Little comments are definitely part of 9s. There's a lot that's overly simplifying it, but it's funny that Because some people can be like, well, I like blankets. I like naps. I like certain things about that. But 9s are like a whole nother level of comfort that's there. And there's a lot more that goes into it than just those things. But it is important for you to kind of find others that process the way you process. Because many of us have been told that we're crazy. Many of us have been told that there's something wrong with you. And I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you other than there's nothing wrong with you that God can't heal, that God can't work in. But we got to be willing to follow him. And that takes surrender. It's not a earning. It's not a, I need to try harder. It's surrender. It's following. That's faith. So, there are 2 ways. The path of truth, path of deception. We are going to explore deception. We are going to explore truth, what these things are. And here's the deal. When we see the path of truth, the path of deception, and we're walking on the right path, you will find affirmation that it's true. It works. That's the best part about the whole thing. And the Bible also even shows us that is how it works. So anyways, you have an incredible purpose. By coming into that path, you will understand what it is. And we get a chance to really see that we are part of God's advancing of a kingdom of love, healing, strength, peace, joy, hope. So like I said, to wrap up this part of today, this service, like I said, gathering. It's not a service. It's a gathering. A gathering that has 3 sections. First one's going to be you, or the individual, each of us, so that we understand about each of us how we think, how we act, why we act the way that we do, and why sometimes that is a problem, but also the thing that's so awesome about that is that God loves us, even in our brokenness, so much that what he is doing to help us in that place and bring us from that into a place that is more like him, his image, his likeness, which is good, which is life, joy, peace. I had a person actually that responded to some of the stuff that we've been posting on social media that said, just a nasty comment, something about the Holocaust, that, going to worship a God that basically turned his back when the Holocaust was happening. No thanks. I'm more righteous than God. Okay, my heart aches for that person because it is a deception. Doesn't understand what's happening. That's not God. Do you think God ended up God was responsible for the Holocaust? And people would say, well, he knows how to do all things, are all powerful, so he was responsible. No, he's not. That's part of deception. It's a perfect example of deception. There's some truth in it. Is he all powerful? Yes, he is. Can he do something? He can, but if he does, that means he's got to judge all evil, everything. And that means if any of us are not right with him, that could be the end. I mean, that's bad news. He's patient. There's a reason. We'll come back to that because I know that's a touchy subject. We'll come back to that. But deception, that's what Satan does. He takes a truth and he manipulates it. If you're here for tonight, you're here for a reason. God brought you here. And so I encourage you to continue in it, to explore it. You're here for a reason. Feed it, nurture it, walk that path and challenge me. Put it to the test. Derek, and it's not going to happen just in one session. He might meet you. God might stir something in you tonight and say, wow, there's something that's there that's got me excited or whatever. There's a lot more than that. A lot more than that. Everything changes when we start to walk that path. And it starts with surrender. And surrender, part of that is being here. So I'm glad you're here. Like I said, first part is you. Second part will be kind of a time where we get to know each other. It's the us, how that comes together. And the last section will learn about God's Word and who He is. And we'll explore right now in the book of Exodus. So we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. So at this time, what we'd like to do is I do want to honor the time that we have here. And I want to change it up, even though it's going to be 3 different sections. Like, wow, it's so long. My hope is that this will actually go by really, really fast because there's so much happening. I don't want people, I know some people, they just want to sneak into a church and then leave. That's not what church is supposed to be. Church is supposed to be a group of people that really do they love one another. And I'm not going to be cheesy with you and make you hug each other or anything like that. I know some people are huggers and some people aren't. But if you're a hugger, just respect people that aren't, But love one another and encourage one another. And that's what's here. Some people have differing opinions and stuff. And be patient. This is a place, church isn't a place, it's not supposed to be a place of people who've got it all figured out. It's supposed to be a place of people that are on their journey of embracing who God is and learning who He is and reflecting Him. And we are going to make mistakes. We are going to we're going to do some things that aren't so nice sometimes. But you can have the opportunity to show grace, mercy, forgiveness, and show people what that's like to embrace things like Jesus when maybe another person's having a hard day. Fellowship, community is important. You can know about God, you can know about yourself, but we can't do it alone. We need each other. Need to be able to embrace one another, to be able to help one another, to pray for one another. So if you're not the talkative type, don't worry. I'm not going to force you to talk. We can't anyways. But I encourage you to turn to one another and to not just sit with just the people that you know, but to kind of go to meet somebody different or whatever. At least there's not a ton of us in here today, but to at least to kind of turn and share your stories with each other and stuff. As we go further into our time together, they are going to get more intentional as far as with some discussions or at least helping one another and kind of learning some of the things that we're learning. But right now, I think it's important just to get to know each other a little bit more than anything. So we've got about 20 minutes or so that we're going to dedicate to that. And so at this time, I'd like you to have some fellowship with one another.
The story of the Bible begins with God bringing life out of darkness, ordering our beautiful world, and then blessing all of its creatures.
Hold on, blessing. That's one of those funny religious words.
Yeah, right. People say a blessing over their meal or after they sneeze.
Or just a general way to say that things are going well for me.
But in the Bible, a blessing is more specific. The first blessing in the Bible is when God creates animals, and He blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the land."
Ah, so God's blessing is about flourishing and multiplication of life.
Right. It's when God shares His life-producing ability with others. Next, God gives humans an additional blessing that sets them apart from the animals. Not only are we one of God's creatures that can generate new life, we've also been appointed as God's representative image to rule and oversee this whole flourishing world on God's behalf.
So part of our blessing is to take care of God's blessing for all creation.
And God wants us to rule while trusting in His abundance, to eat from the tree of blessing, that is, the tree of God's own eternal life.
Now there is another tree to eat from.
Yes, and it represents this decision to try and seize abundance and life on our own terms by our own wisdom.
The humans encounter a deceptive creature who tricks them into eating from this other tree, thinking it's a shortcut to blessing.
And instead of blessing, this tree brings a curse.
A curse? You mean like a magic spell?
No, in the Bible, the curse is when God hands people over to the consequences of seizing our own blessing on our own terms. It's a curse because instead of abundance and life, we end up with scarcity, isolation, and death. So God curses the ground, and instead of fruitfulness, there will be famine. Instead of overseeing the world, they will have to work the land until they die.
Man.
But God also curses that deceptive creature that fooled the humans, saying that a human will come one day to destroy it. And that human will be born into a world of scarcity, where men and women and families and tribes are all locked in violent conflict.
If God's blessing is now covered with a curse, how can we flourish? Even more, how can we rule with God?
Well, here the biblical story takes an interesting turn. God chooses one couple, Abraham and Sarah, and God blesses them and says they will become a huge family.
Be fruitful and multiply.
And there's more. God says that His blessing on Abraham and his family is for this larger purpose, so that through them, God's blessing can go out to all of the nations.
So God's plan is to reverse the curse and restore the blessing by first blessing this one family.
Right. And this family does experience God's blessing. Even when they journey through times of danger and scarcity, they grow into this huge nation, Israel.
And God brings them to a mountain and invites them to be His representatives.
Yes, God will bless Israel so that they can become a blessing to the nations. All they have to do is trust and live by God's wisdom. And they're told that this is a choice between life and death, between blessing and curse.
Now keep reading, because the Israelites almost never trust God for His blessing. Their story is filled with tales of deception, violent grabs for power, resulting in the ultimate curse: exile from their land and slavery to foreign nations.
But Israel's prophets, who lived through all of this, they still trusted in God's promise to Abraham. And they anticipated a future Israelite who would come to restore God's blessing and reverse the curse for Israel and for all the nations.
When we turn to the story of Jesus, we find Israel still experiencing the curse, living as slaves to the Roman Empire.
But Jesus, He so trusted in God's blessing. He claimed that it was arriving in a new way through Himself.
He wanted His followers to trust in God's abundance, to share and be generous.
And He even taught His followers to bless people who curse them. Jesus would even reverse the curse by healing and restoring people's bodies.
God's blessing is being unleashed.
Jesus also confronted His fellow Israelites who were in power, and He accused them of getting in the way of God's plan to bless Israel and the nations through them.
Those leaders arrest Jesus so they could have Him killed.
And instead of fighting back, Jesus believed that He was that chosen Israelite who would face the curse that Israel and all humanity deserves, and He would allow the curse to fall on Him.
Jesus dies the shameful death of a man under the curse.
But just as God brought life and blessing out of darkness in the beginning, so here, through Jesus, God reverses death by raising Jesus. The curse is put to death, so that the blessing of God's life can spread out once again.
After His resurrection, Jesus blessed His followers, and He said that His presence would be with them as they learn to trust in God's blessing and share with others.
And while death and the curse still have a hold on our world, followers of Jesus trust that the power of God's blessing is even stronger.
It means we can live with extreme generosity, even when it seems like there's not enough.
And that leads us to the conclusion of the biblical story, where every nation is enjoying the gifts of God's abundance, because in God's new world that is sustained by the life-giving power of Jesus, there is no longer any curse.
And so we are in chapter 16 in the book of Exodus, and we are looking at 1 through 36. So I'm going through a lot of stuff in a very short period of time here today. My wife does not believe I can do it, so we will see if we'll pull that off in basically 30 minutes. So what we saw last week is that God had promised in chapter 15, God promised Israel that if you listen to me, if you simply listen to my instructions, then I will not bring any of the curses that I brought on Egypt on you. I will be your healer. And it's so important because God just gave them the key. He gave them the secret. He gave them the cheat sheet, basically, to all the tests and everything that's going to happen is just listen to me. Listen. And it's similar to what I was saying before. If we have somebody that, if we're drowning and we have a lifeguard come out and try to rescue us and we say, hold on, do you have a license to do this? How are you planning on doing this anyways? And where are you taking me? Because I need my beach towel and stuff is over there. No, I don't think I'm going to let you save me today. I choose not to listen to you. God's like, just listen to me. Just let me lead you out of this place. Let me help you. And if you follow me, I will lead you into a place of life. And so we see here in our chapter then is where it starts to see whether they're going to do that or not. And so let's get into our text. So we're looking again, Exodus 16. This is after God has just rescued Israel from slavery in Egypt. The whole first part of the Exodus is God and Pharaoh kind of combating each other. God has dealt with them at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's no longer going to bother Israel. They are freed from slavery there. And now the focus gets to God and Israel. And so we're going to see, is Israel any different than Pharaoh or not? So here we go. So in verse 1, and you'll see that my slides, not as much today as they normally are very colorful. And it's because I'm trying to show patterns of what is happening in the text. Hebrew writing especially, and even Greek, Hebrew is what the Old Testament was written in, Greek in the New Testament, is very poetic. And so it's important, I highlight those things so that you can see what's happening in the text. Here, more so, I've highlighted who's speaking so that you see who's speaking and saying what. So in brown is more of Israel. I think, green is Moses and Aaron, and then you have God, which is the blue for today. Mine actually looks almost purple, but blue is what it is. So here we are in our text. So verse 1, it says, they set out from Elim, which is the place where this promise was made. And Elim, the name, means a grove of strong trees. So that's a fascinating thing because the tree of life and the burning bush were trees. They were images that God used to show what he's going to do with Israel, with his people, that we will be a tree of life. That's what in the garden with Adam and Eve, this nourishment, if we have our roots go down into that which is God, which is life-giving, then we will be a tree of life to other people. The burning bush shows an image of God's presence that is this fire that doesn't consume the tree. And so if God's people are this tree, last time I checked, wood gets consumed by fire, but not this burning bush. This bush, the fire is there, but it doesn't consume the wood. And so Israel, God's people, is going to learn how to embrace the fire and not get burned by it. To be a people that can embrace the presence of God. And so they set out from Elim, which is the strong trees, grove of trees. So it's an image of what they can be from this promise. And all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. This word sin means thorns, which is an image for sin. Hence Jesus with the crown of thorns, that he becomes the king of sin. But the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. Sinai is my thorns. So it's sin with I on it. So my thorns. Or it can also mean my bush, which is where the burning bush was, at Mount Sinai. And remember, God had told Moses, I will bring you back here and you will worship me, and this will be a validation that I am Yahweh, I am God, the living God. So, brings him back to my bush, my thorns. On the 15th day of the second month, and after he had departed from the land of Egypt. So it was a month later, almost to the day that they left Egypt. So it tells you how much time has gone by. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill us, this whole assembly, with hunger. So there's not enough food to eat. They've been in a wilderness is a desert region. It's the same thing. Wilderness might not mean the same as what we think wilderness, but it's basically a desert region. So there isn't a whole lot of rain, water, food, anything. And so there's not enough food that's there. There's about 2 million people, including children and women, that are in this Israel that's going, and there's no food anywhere. And so this growing concern as they're looking at each other, as they're all growing thinner, and their animals are growing thinner, and they're hungry, and they're getting irritated with each other, and there's nothing but sun and sand everywhere. They're like, if something doesn't change, we're going to die. We're all going to die out here. It's been a month. And so there is some time that's been building up. It's not as quick of they just saw the Red Sea split. How can they be so short on their faith? It's a test. It is. But remember, God just said in last chapter, if you listen to me, then I will be the God to heal you. And so we'll watch what happens here. So, slow death by hunger is not a fun experience. I've never gone through it, but I think anybody that hasn't eaten for a period of time, you get a little, pun intended, taste of it, of what that kind of feels like. But the slow death by hunger made the plagues in Egypt look appealing, made them look like that would have been a better option. If we just had died in the plagues of Egypt, would have been better for us than dying out here slowly and watching each of us just drop dead out in the wilderness. And so, in the next slide, in verse 4, it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you. That phrase is extremely important. Bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out. We're going to come back to that phrase. And gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them. That's a key phrase, that I may test them. I am going to rain bread from heaven, and the people will go out and gather a day's portion every day, so I can test them, whether they will walk in my law or not, so whether they will listen, the very thing that he just said, listen to every word. In counseling, there's all different types of counseling that I'll do with people. And it can be everything from anger management to marital counseling to deliverance, spiritual issues that we're dealing with, demonic issues. When I end up getting done dealing with a demonic issue, then there is conditioning that needs to be reconditioned in a person's life. And when I see that when God then comes into this person's life and starts working in their life, this is what usually happens, is that they feel like kind of testing starts. And it's not bad. It's not that, people a lot of times they think that God is beating up on them or something, but it's not that. It's him trying to teach us how to walk with him. Teach us how to walk with him. So there'll be a challenge that's there. And a lot of times people are like, gosh, I've already got this challenge and I just ended up overcoming as far as something else. And now this other thing is now irritating me. This trigger is still there. And I say, try to think about this as an opportunity for you to learn how to grow in God, how to be able to embrace him in this trigger place. The demonic element has been removed. So now you have the ability to choose him. It doesn't feel like you're completely overwhelmed or surrendered to this where you can't make that choice. Now you can. So now bring God into this situation and you'll see that you have a choice and a power and access to something way greater than you've ever had before. You have an opportunity to walk with him, to learn how to walk with him. That's what he does in the wilderness. That's the whole point of the wilderness, and he doesn't need to see what Israel's going to do. He already knows what Israel's going to do. The testing is for them to see what they're going to do. He just already told them, if you listen to me, I'll be your healer. So we're going to see here what happens, whether they're walking my ways or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it'll be twice as much as they gather daily. So what he's saying here, 7-day week, 6 days, they gather for each day, just enough for each day. On the 6th day will be twice as much because they're not going to gather anything on the 7th day. And we're going to see that that's going to be a day of rest. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? Moses and Aaron are the ones that are being grumbled against. But in reality, what they're saying to them is, you're grumbling against the Lord, not you're grumbling to us, but it's against Yahweh, against the Lord that you're grumbling to. Anyways, and they're calling these provisions out, prophesying like they did with the plagues with Pharaoh. Remember that Moses said, this is what's going to happen in this plague here before it happened. So it's not just by chance. If you've ever watched the Discovery Channel or History Channel where it said, oh, well, we know now that all these plagues happened just in a coincidence within a few months period of time. All of them happened in the exact order how Moses called it out. Even if that happened, Moses called it out, and it happened in the very moment that he called it out for. That's called a miracle. And so here they're doing it again, that they called it out before it even happened. This is what God is going to do. Remember, the battle is between God and Pharaoh in the first part of the Exodus. Now it's God and Israel. And we're seeing, and we're going to see, the question is Israel any different from Pharaoh? Are they going to listen to him or not? Pharaoh didn't listen to him, and it was to his destruction. Now we're going to see, will God's people, will they listen to Yahweh? Which is the name that God has revealed himself as, is the living God. That's what the Lord means, Yahweh, the living God. So, in the next slide, in verse 8, it says, Moses said that when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard of your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. So again, it's to us, but it's against Yahweh, and he's aware of this. Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. He's heard it. And evening and morning is a phrase that is used in Genesis 1 for creation. There was evening, there was morning the first day. There was evening and morning second day. So this is a reminder that God is recreating here, but he's recreating his people. We can look at this, we can be like, boring. But here's the thing. This is what he does with us. This applies to you and I. When he first brings us into him, he starts this new creation. As we're going to see here, this bread from heaven is what Jesus is. Jesus becomes the bread from heaven, but the real bread from heaven. And so this is a foreshadow of what he does with us. And it's not just with Israel. It's not just with one person. It's every one of us. All of us. This is a pattern for us to recognize that when God saves us, he pulls us in and he starts walking with us. He starts teaching us how to walk with him, how to do life with him. It's the challenges that actually help us to see, I can't do this on my own. I need him to be there to be able to provide. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it. And so all of this, if you listen to me, then you will be healed. Follow me, and I will heal you. No matter what it is that you've gone through. No matter what. People have said to me, and I've had The people I deal with, these are not small issues. The people I get that call me are the ones that say, I've been to so many people and nobody can help me. Oh, good. Great. Nobody can help me. It's like the Star Wars, Obi-Wan. Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope. You're my only hope, Derek. But it's not me that they come for. They come for God. And God's going to do a work in them. These are hard cases. And God does. It's the same pattern with us. So as soon as Aaron spoke, the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness. And behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. So they're calling him, they're saying, come near, present your case to him, kind of like Job, for it's Yahweh that you have that you have a problem with. So come out and present your case to him ultimately. And he shows up. Can you imagine that? He shows up in a pillar of cloud, which they've already seen. So in verse 11, and the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So this knowing, this is an intimate knowledge, and this is what God calls us into. It's to know him and then to reflect him. Intimate knowing. This word knowing is it's reserved for people that are married together. So even a sexual kind of a thing, an intimate knowledge of one another. So you will know intimately that I am the Lord your God who rescued you from Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world. You slaves came out of that. And the only reason why you did is because I got involved. That's it. Don't forget that. That's something that's important for all of us to remember. This is the same God that works with us. When we say, but you don't understand my background, you don't understand what I've been through, what God says is you don't understand who I am. You don't know me yet, but you will if you listen to me. Just follow me and I'll show you who I am. I want to reveal myself to you. And what he's going to do is he's going to feed them like with breadcrumbs, basically. He's going to be feeding them, teaching them how to walk with him. So Yahweh, God, affirms what they're saying is going to happen. And continue in verse 13, in the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, dew lay on the ground all around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. And when the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is that? For they did not know what it was. So there's that knowing. They didn't know this. They're going to call it manna, which some people believe it means. What is that? That's what a lot of people believe that manna means. What is that? This bread, they didn't know the bread. But Yahweh's also saying, I'm going to give you these things so that you know who I am. Oh, you don't know the bread either. Well, this is a time of new creation. God is creating something new. He's going to show them something that they've never seen before. Neither has anyone in the world. He's giving them something new. There's a new creation that's happening here. So, moving on, slide number 5. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is the bread that came from heaven. This is what the Lord has commanded. So listen to me. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as you can eat, as much as he can eat. You shall each take an omer, according to the number of the persons that each of you has in his tent. So he's telling them, take a certain amount for each of you. And he's putting a limit to it for each day. So he's saying, this is how much that you shall have for each of you each day. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less, depends on how many people they had in their family. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. There was more than enough. And you see that when Jesus feeds the thousands in the New Testament, there's always more than enough. Always. They had to gather extra. They gathered extra bread and fishes, both of them. There was more than enough. Everybody ate their fill. Same thing here. The people of Israel did so. So moving on to the next slide, 19, Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over until the morning. Clear instructions. Don't keep any of it. Don't hoard any of it. Can anybody relate to this? This is an agricultural thing, right? Well, what if it doesn't show up in the morning? I'm going to hold on to a little bit more. I'm going to hoard a little bit here. I'm going to keep a little extra just in case I need it. I mean, I know God said, I promise that I'll give it to you every day. You remember what Jesus tells us in the Lord's Prayer? Those of us that know that? Give us this day. What? Our daily bread. This is the daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. Lord, give me today what I need. He promises, I will give you what you need each day if you turn to me, if you trust me, if you listen to me. I will be there for you. I will provide for you. And that's what he's teaching them every moment, every day. You've got to trust me. Don't put any in your tent or pack it away. It'll be there every day for you. I don't go on vacation. I'm not going to be on a phone call and forget or whatever that when it came time for feeding that I overlooked you. It will happen. Clear instructions. Do not keep any for the next day. They have to release control. That's the hardest part about being a Christian. I was just talking about this with one of you today before our service. One word that makes Christianity hard: surrender. Until we surrender, Christianity is impossible. When people say to me, Derek, it's so hard being a Christian, I always say to myself, it gets easier. I mean, it's a challenge. But once we surrender, then we don't grasp as much at the control part of it. I don't have to figure everything out. I don't have to know everything because God's got it. And some people, when they see that, they look at it and they go, that guy's an idiot. He's just relinquishing all control and everything. He's just giving it all to God and so that he doesn't stress out. But here's the difference. When it really is God, nothing gets ignored. He does provide. He does show up, so I guess it's not an idiot anymore. Because he actually reaches back. He shows up. It's hard for humans to trust God when they're not used to it. Especially when survival has been something that's been part of our past, where we're like, you know what, people haven't taken care of me in the past. I had to do it myself. Or if you're a single parent, if you're like, hey, if I don't go to work, if I don't do certain things, we don't eat. I have to do my job, and that doesn't change with God. We have our role to play also. He has his. We have to know what that boundary is. Where's my role? Where's his? The Bible talks about being a slacker or a sluggard. You don't want to be that. We have our role to play, but there's a point of what part is God's, what part is us. And that's important for us to understand. We learn that by walking with him. Where? Through the wilderness. The wilderness is never fun. Nobody likes the wilderness. It's sandy, it's hot, it's uncomfortable. But that's important. Being uncomfortable is important. That's where we learn. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until the morning, and it bred worms and it stank. And Moses was very angry with them. So isn't that interesting that God made it very clear whoever kept this stuff, they were highlighted. You got worms. What smells over there? Fred didn't trust God. He's got a ton of manna in his tent. Every day, whoever got it, you got worms in your tent, it stinks. So it's being highlighted. Morning by morning, they gathered as much as they could eat, but when the sun grew hot, it melted, so it went away. All right, so next slide. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each, and when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept until morning. So they laid it aside until morning, as Moses commanded them. It did not stink, and there were no worms in it. So the sixth day will be different from all other days. Every other day, it grows worms in it, and it stinks. One day, it doesn't. Doesn't make any sense. But that's the point. That's the lesson. Because it's God's instructions. Doesn't need to make sense. You don't have to control it. It's just simply what he says. This is what we do. And here's the thing that's fascinating. God gives us clear instructions of what our part is to come into his peace. His rest. That's what the Sabbath is a day of rest, day of peace. But we got to listen to him. We have to follow his instructions in order to come into that rest and that peace. And if we don't listen to him, we can't expect that we're going to come into it. He wants to give it to us, but we got to listen. It's not a matter of earning anything. You didn't earn anything. You didn't earn the manna. You listened, and he provides. It's a surrender. It's a giving up. And again, that's hard for humans to do that. In order to live in the miraculous provisions of God, we need to carefully follow all of his instructions. The miraculous provision is not just for the bread, and it's not just that one day is unique, but also that he instructs us how to live in his rest. Okay, next slide, verse 25. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." Sabbath rest is in line with creation. So when God rests, and it's important to a group of people that used to be slaves, no rest. Yes, they have to work. Yes, they have things they need to do, but God is a God of rest. They are a people of rest, and ultimately God is also taking us to a place of ultimate rest, which is in heaven eventually, but he's taking us somewhere. God doesn't pull us out of Egypt just to let us die in the wilderness. He's taking us somewhere. And that should be a place, and that weekly rest reminds us of the rest that God is taking us to, ultimate. It's a reminder. It's a little, I call them, for me, they're D treats. Derek, D, my nieces and nephews call me D, so D treats. So little treat there, Derek did a good job, here's a little treat, a D treat for you. All right? Rest every week. But we have to follow him. Even us as humans, though, we corrupt the good stuff that God gives us. And we, in the New Testament, we see that they even corrupt a day of Sabbath. Totally different subject that we'll go down a different day. So this C, not only visually, but to understand and look at the things, look at things differently. It's a new perspective. We are called out of the darkness and to remove the blindness and to be able to see. We are conditioned for self-preservation. And in the Genesis account, naked and vulnerable, Adam and Eve is exposed when they decide not to listen to God. But God is showing them that his presence changes everything. Changes everything if they're willing to listen to him and to follow him the way that he tells them. So, on the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather. They found none. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore the 6 days. He gives you the bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. They had to learn. But God is still patient here. He isn't, at this point here, he isn't striking them for not listening. He's patient. He's a little irritated with them, but at the same point, he's patient. He is saying, look, I told you what you needed to do. Listen. So the next slide, verse 31. Now the house of Israel, they called the name of it manna. It was like coriander seed, white. And the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." Honey was the apex of ancient food flavoring. Remember, there's no sugar yet. So it was very rare also. You had to catch it from the bees. So very rare. Incredible for food flavoring, for sweetness, whatever. There's also an image for wisdom in the Bible. Wafers are basically thin cookies. So few Israelites ever had this either. And so what it's saying is that the manna was like wafers made with honey. What it's ultimately saying is most delicious food imaginable. It's amazing. This is like honey cookies. Something none of us ever get. And yet we'll eventually see that they get tired of it. So keeping the manna for others to see shows the importance that this bread was for Israel to never forget what God has done for them, his provisions on a regular basis. All right, last slide, 33. Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put an omer of manna in it, place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations, as the Lord commanded Moses. So Aaron placed it before the testimony, which is the ark of the ark is where God's presence actually dwelt. So he put it in there to be kept. The people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan, which is the promised land. And an omer is a 10th part of an ephah. It's just basically their way of telling generations in the future how much this actually was. So, showing that this bread is to be put in the ark, it shows how important. This is a big deal. The manna is a huge deal. This is something that trumps all the other items that are even in the tabernacle or anything. It's in the ark. It's with the ark there, which is where God's presence is. So this bread was the main food source for 40 years. It's an image and literal life source for them. The presence of God and his bread were closely linked, and Jesus picks up on this image. And this is what I'm going to end with. Two passages. One in Deuteronomy 8, verses 1 through 5. This is what God says, and Jesus refers back to this when he's in the wilderness, and he's tempted by Satan. First of all, it says, the whole commandment that I command you today, you should be careful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land the Lord swore to give to you and your fathers. You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, and your fathers didn't know, that he might make you know that man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. Jesus quotes that very thing to Satan when he tries to tempt him. Your clothing did not wear out, your foot did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, the Lord your God disciplines you. He teaches us because he loves us. It's for our good. It's for our healing. And here's what Jesus says in John 6:25 through 59. I'm not going to do that whole passage. This is just a quick summary, and I'll conclude for us today. He says, do not work for food that perishes. This is Jesus. But the food that endures to eternal life, which I give you through the faith in me. I am the bread of life. The true bread of heaven, which gives life to the world. The bread that came down from heaven, right? Jesus says, I'm the true bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the entire world. Yet even it says in this scenario, they grumbled. Just like the Exodus, they grumbled. And it was written in the prophets, Jesus says in verse 45 is where he picks up here, they will all be taught by God. Taught is the discipline, is teaching, learning to walk with him. Everyone who has heard and learned, meaning put it into practice, comes to me. Everyone who has heard and learned comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except he who is from the Father. He says, truly I say to you, whoever believes in me has eternal life. I am the bread of life. And he says that your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. But this bread that comes down from heaven, which is him, if you eat it, you'll never die. Eternal life. I am the bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give him for the bread of the world, it is my flesh. Jesus died on a cross to forgive us for sins. He took that wrath upon himself so that we would be made clean with God. And what that did is it allowed for the presence of God, His Holy Spirit, to come into us. And what happens is that Spirit leads us every day. It feeds us. It guides us. It directs us. And we have to learn how to embrace that presence of God. And if we don't, it's always there. But what happens with most Christians is that they accept Christ. They say the sinner's prayer. So they think it's this magical thing that everything just falls into place afterwards. Yes, it's the beginning. But it's the beginning of the journey. It's like the Red Sea, yes, and a miraculous thing happened, and you have access to this amazing power. But God starts to teach us how to use it at that point. We need to learn how to walk in the Spirit of God because things like this will teach us. If you don't have a person or people to disciple, to walk alongside and say, this is what God is doing, we'll never find... It's so much harder to come into that without a disciple, without a person to walk along with you. I didn't have that, so it's not impossible. God did it with me, and it took way longer than it needed to. Way longer. And that's where I have compassion for people, because I'm like, it doesn't have to be that long. I mean, God is doing things in our life, and it's real. It's very real. It's not fake. I watch it all the time. I watched a woman on a deathbed. She's Polish. She couldn't speak any English, so her niece is sitting there with me, and she's like, I've watched this woman speak a language demonic that I never even heard before. And I'm like, okay, great. I can't even hear what she's saying, so I can't talk to her. I can only pray over her. I prayed over this woman. Was like something that I saw when I was growing up. If you guys remember times in Ethiopia where the famine was happening, you have these kids that are nothing but bones. That's what she looked like. This nurse had to come in and turn her over. She was uncomfortable and needed to turn. She didn't have the strength to turn herself. And I just simply prayed over her. Her niece said, we've had pastors come in and she's just spit at them and laughed at them and stuff like that and everything. And I'm like, all right, great. So I prayed. And she just went to sleep. She had a smile come over her face, just a peace, and she slept. And I'm like, is she dead? She wasn't dead. I didn't hear from this woman, this niece, for a long time, months. And then I was kind of following up on some stuff, and she said, oh, yeah, she's fine. She was in hospice. She was going to die any moment. And she says, oh, yeah, she's fine. I'm like, could you maybe tell me that? That's information I would like to hear. Yeah, she's been fine. She totally had a recovery. After you were done with her, she recovered. She's fine. I didn't do that. God did that. Why does God do that? The only thing that's different about me is that He taught me His way. And all of us have access to that power. But it's not something that you go on some late night show to show the power that you have of healing. It's you ask God to lead you wherever that is. And when He brings you to a person that is, sometimes it is an extreme situation like that. Sometimes it's not. Many times it's not. Many times it's just more subtle. But the person needs help. They need healing. And if you know the path, then God wants to use us because He needs good narrators to tell the story. To teach people how to walk in His way. Because there's tons of them out there that don't know the way. They think they do, but they don't. And nothing happens when they pray with them, when they walk with them, when they disciple with them. If we're surrendered to God and He leads us, He teaches us how to walk with Him. He calls us to know Him so that we can reflect Him. That is what this is all about. This Lighthouse Identity Project is a combination of two ministries coming together to teach people to embrace the presence of God. This is something the church was always meant to do, and it lost its way as a whole. You don't hear many churches talking about deliverance or spiritual warfare or walking in the Holy Spirit of God unless they're Pentecostal, and that's a whole nother story. So what we're doing here is sharing the way. And I look forward to what God is going to do with each and every one of us. We need to remember who we are. We need to remember we all have a purpose, every one of us. We have a purpose as humans, but also every one of us, because of our pasts, have a purpose that God has preordained for us. We'll never come into it if we don't submit to Him and let Him guide us into that. But if we do, I promise you, your story is going to be the most incredible story ever, because He will use your past to heal people going forward. He'll teach them. He'll teach you how to meet them where they are, to speak into their lives, to simply love them and guide them, not judge them or throw them out or tell them because they've been divorced they're not welcome in your church or whatever the case is, because you've been an alcoholic or because you've done drugs or because you're whatever, a prostitute or anything like that. All I know is that Jesus spent time with those people. He loved them. He came for the sick to heal them. That's what we're supposed to do. And that's what I invite all of us into here today. So let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this message. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your presence. And we thank you for every person that came here tonight. Lord, we pray that you would continue to bless each of us, that you would bless this ministry, and that you would help us to reach those that need this. We pray all this in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.